Okay, we are starting chapter 12, page 1228. So we've more or less finished the very esoteric sections of the book with references to that initial prophecy and the leaving of God's Shekhinah from the Beit HaMikdash. We're now going to go back into one of our earlier themes of trying to convince the Jews in Bavel that the prophecy is that the destruction is coming imminently and that they really need to get it into their heads. So it sounds like despite all of the progress that we've made, right, we're still going to be hitting this dead horse, right, consistently until we finally have some clarity from their part. It doesn't seem to have sunk in quite yet. Vahidvar Hashem Elai Lemor, and God's word came to me saying, Ben Adam, Betoch Beit Hameri Ata Yoshev, you sit amongst a rebellious crew. Asher Einayim Lahem Lerot Velo Ra'u, those Naim Lahem Lishma Velo Shameu, Ki Beit Meri Haim, right? They are a group, they have eyes but they cannot see, they have ears but they cannot hear. They are a rebellious bunch.
Just in that general sense.
Mm-hmm.
To look at it from a more global thing, what is it that you expect them to do? In other words, is this being written so that we, when we read this, should not be comfortable thinking, oh yeah, everything is great because look what happened back then? Or is he expecting...
I mean, I think first and foremost he's talking to his generation.
Okay, so if he's talking to his generation,
Mm-hmm.
so if someone came to the United States and said, you know what, there's going to be so much anti-Semitism here, everybody needs to move to Israel.
Okay.
And that's not even, right. Is he expecting everybody to leave, is he expecting everybody to pack up, leave Yerushalayim? I mean, it's even more than that, than someone said doing that to here. Everybody to leave the Beis HaMikdash, go into exile, just run away as a disorganized group.
So he's more talking to people in Bavel right now, because they haven't gotten in their heads that the people in Yerushalayim are going to be destroyed and thrown out. So it's not clear, by the way, this parak goes back and forth. The Rishonim can't figure out when he talks about these rebellious people, is he talking about the people in Yerushalayim or is he talking about the people in Bavel?
Okay.
The simpler explanation, in my opinion, is talking about the people in Bavel. The people in Bavel still have not gotten through their heads that the people in Yerushalayim are going to be destroyed, and that, right, we've already had this conversation, you guys are the future, right, kind of get on that bandwagon, I don't know why I have to keep on telling you.
Okay.
And it's funny because on the one hand he's got to be a cheerleader, but on the other hand he can't say, you guys are so awesome, everything's
Right.
perfect, because heck, you're already kicked out of the
Right.
land, you know? So
Right.
it's a weird
It's
knife edge to walk.
he's definitely trying to walk the tightrope, and it's not simple. So this is just a reminiscent, this line about it's from Hallel, it's from Tehillim. If you want to see it, I'm sure you know it, you're familiar with it, but 1538, if you want to look at it, right, Pelahem v'lo yidaberu, Einayim v'lo yir'un, Aznayim v'lo yishma'un, Aflam v'lo yirichun, right, so we're talking about actually idolatry at that point. In the psalm that we say in Hallel, that, right, the idolatry, they have eyes but can't see, ears but can't hear, nose but can't smell. So, right, this language here of the eyes that can't see and ears that can't hear, so in some ways it's kind of like, I would say, a reference to the idolatry a little bit that's in the background, more in Yerushalayim, more in the roots of why they got exiled in the first place, but still, right, stop behaving, right, like a bunch of idols. Fine. So, Pasuk Gimel. Va'ata ben Adam asolecha klei gola. So now we have more symbolic acts. He's back to trying to convey information to people via actions as opposed to words, which in some ways is a regression because the people it doesn't seem to be sticking. So make for yourself vessels of exile, ugulei yomam le'einehem, and basically you should take them before their eyes every single day. Vegalisa mimkom achayil makom acher, and you should basically get up and travel out le'enehem ula yer'u ki beit merihema, and maybe eventually it will sink in that they don't get it, that the Jews who are in Yerushalayim are going to be in exile, right? So basically he wants them to create these a little bit of pottery or a little bit of something that they can kind of signify as like you're grabbing on the run to go, and he wants them to every single day basically to reenact this taking of this Kli Gola out in front of them, and hopefully it will sink in. V'hotzeisa kelecha kechlei gola yomam le'enehem v'ata tetzei ba'erev le'enehem kemotzei gola. And then he gets more specific. You should take this stuff and specifically leave at nights, because generally speaking, when you get kicked out, you don't get to choose when you get to leave, right? So it's much more inconvenient to have to leave your home with whatever you have in the evening when you can't really see. They didn't really have lights. It was much more treacherous to travel at that time. But when you're kicked out, you're kicked out. And you have to go whenever you have to go. Pasuk Hey. Le'enehem chasar lecha bakir v'hotzei sabo, and right before your eyes, dig yourself in the wall and go out through it. So it's as if someone, right? Some of the modern parshanim point out like what? So they didn't have time to take their axes and their shovels. No, because again, the whole point is that right, he's trying to demonstrate to them what happens when you get kicked out. You don't have that ability to kind of pack your bags and take everything that you need. So he is right. He's now in front of a wall. Has to get through the wall. He has to dig through it, right? Without any utensils or anything or any tools to help him do it. Lenehem al katef tisa ba'alata, and before their eyes you shall carry in the dark. Totzi panecha techaseh, you should cover your face. V'lo tir'eh et haaretz, you won't see the land. Kimo feit nesaticha lebeit Yisrael, right? For I have made you a sign for the house of Israel. So we're going to see in a second. So at this point, right, we're talking all about, right, it seems like we're talking about the entirety of the Jewish people. Right? It sounds like. Right? We're going to see pretty shortly that it's very possible this is all referring to a very specific situation that is about to happen historically. And we'll go back to Malachim and kind of review what took place and what is actually being said here. And then we'll have to talk about why it's all kind of written in code, because it's not so clear what's happening here. This is much more of like an allusion to something. But once I tell you what the Rishonim say that something is, a lot of the pieces fall into place. So let's get a little bit further into the chapter, and then we'll kind of jump backwards and explain how it all makes sense. Va'as kein akasher tzuvesi kli hotzesi kechli gola yomam uva'erev chasarti li bakir biyad ba'atalav hotzesi al katef nasasi lenehem. So basically he does everything that God tells him to do. So that was just kind of, this is what you should do, and now he's doing all of those things. And then in the morning, God spoke to Yechezkel again. Right? Basically, he's been doing this every single morning, and God says to Yechezkel, haven't they asked you, what are you doing? Right. Which is probably a rhetorical question. I mean, they probably have asked him what he was doing, but God just told him to keep on doing this and didn't tell him to give them any explanation or any, right? So basically, he's just kind of piquing their interest by doing this same strange act every single morning for however long he's doing it. They keep on asking. He hasn't given anything. At this point, God comes to him and says, okay, if they've been asking, and more alehem, say to them, Ko amar Hashem Elokim, Hanasi hamasa hazeh b'Yerushalayim, v'chol beis Yisrael, asher hema b'tocham. Okay, so who's the focal point, right, of this prophecy? Even it sounded like it was talking about the whole Jewish people, but, right, it's really concerning the prince, right, is the main burden of this prophecy, who is in Yerushalayim, and the entirety of the Jewish people who kind of follow him. So we have to talk about who is that prince. So this is your sign, right? As I have done, so it will be done to them. In the exile and captivity they shall go, right? So these people who are in Yerushalayim following this prince, they're all going to go into exile, and me doing this is basically a sign to you that this is imminent. El katef yisa b'atala v'yitzei bakir v'yachteru lo panav yichaseh ya'an asher lo yir'eh la'ayin hu et ha'aretz. Right? And the prince who is among them will carry on his shoulders in the dark and go out, and they will dig in the wall to bring out through it. Again, trying to get through a wall without tools. He will cover his face in order not to see the earth with his eyes, which we'll talk about shortly as well. Ufarasti es rashti alav v'nit pas b'bitzudasi v'heveti oso bavela eretz kasdim v'otelo yir'eh v'sham yamut. Right? And basically he'll be caught in the trap, he'll be brought to Bavel, he will not actually see there, and he will die there. V'chol asher svivotav ezro, v'chol agapav ezareh. So all of his helpers will scatter. Right, a nice play on words there. His helpers, Ezra with an ayin, ezareh will scatter with an aleph. With very similar words. The chol ruach to every direction. V'charev arik acharehem. And as we've seen, the remnants who survive the Babylonian onslaught in Yerushalayim are all going to be chased with swords, right? So meaning most of them are going to die with famine and whatnot, but those who survive are going to have the swords to their back as they flee. And they will know, you will know I am God when they get scattered amongst the nations in all the lands. Okay, a little bit further. Right, there'll be a number, a small number who are mecharev, who will survive from the sword, me'ra'av u'midever, from the famine and from pestilence. Manis apruas kol tovotehem bagoyim, in order that they can be kind of the spokespeople for all those who died. Asher ba'u sham v'yadu keni Hashem, and you will know then, it will be basically the confirmation of all that I've been telling you, that I am God and that what I've been telling you is true. Fine. So let's stop there. We're going to have another kind of action he has to do and Pasuk Yud Zayin, but let's try to understand what exactly this big prophecy is about. So does anyone know or have any initial thoughts as to who this prophecy is referring to? Tzidkiyahu. Yeah, so Tzidkiyahu, if you remember, was the Babylonian implant to take over as king for the Jewish people. He serves for 11 years. Just find where it is in Malachim. You could probably find it just by looking through, but I have here 25.
947.
Yeah, chapter 25 in Malachim Bet. Right, so Tzidkiyahu reigns for 11 years, and in the process, so first of all, he's propped up by Bavel. Bavel basically chooses him to be the king, and at some point he decides to rebel against Bavel. So, right, so if you look in chapter 25 in the beginning, so right, Nebuchadnezzar comes, and they lay a siege against the city. And on the 9th day of the 4th month, the famine in the city became critical, which that pasuk is important for the next section of this parak. We're going to see that the food being eaten is eaten in grave peril. So, right, so there's going to be a famine, and there's this siege. The city is breached, right? And what happens? Pasuk Dalid, right? But Tibaka ha'ir, so the city is breached. V'chol ad shem melchama, all the Jewish men of war, Halayla derech shar beit hachotmim asher al gan hamelech v'kastim al ir saviv ve'ech derech arava. So they basically sneak out through the garden. So So a lot of the modern Parshanim say, "What do you mean? That's exactly what's happening here, right? Someone's trying to get through some muddy wall, right? So they are inside the garden of the king. The garden of the king probably had bushes, whatever's around it, and now they have to somehow get out of the garden to sneak away, and in the dead of night." Okay, but they don't really get too far. They get pursued. They're overtook in the plains of Jericho, and Batisbesu et hamelech vayalu oto el melech Bavel, Rivlasa veidabru ito mishpat, and so the Tzidkiyahu gets caught. He's brought to this area, and the Bnei Tzidkiyahu are killed in front of his face. And then what do? They blind Tzidkiyahu and they put him in chains and they bring him to Bavel. Right, so that language of he comes to Bavel, right, but does not see the land and dies there in anonymity. What?
And he covers his eyes.
Right. right? So you have this very, right, graphic situation that's being alluded to with this action of Yechezkel trying to convey, right, what's about to happen in Yerushalayim to the remnant of the Jews there. Now, and this is, right, if you just recall, right, you have here, right, like, this is the end. This is the end of the end, right? There's a Gedaliah that gets assassinated in this chapter, and that's the end of the Jewish diaspora, right? That's the end of the Jews in Israel. This is when all the Jews are sent into Galut. So this is really kind of the imminence and the reality that Yechezkel is describing here. And Tzidkiyahu is described as the prince because originally he was the prince, right? His brother was the king before him, right? Yechonyah, who was exiled. So you have kind of like this passed down situation. We're going to see he's called, I think, Zar'ei Hamelach in chapter 17 in Yechezkel. He's referred to as, right, different things. We're going to come back to the Tzidkiyahu exile and whatnot again in the upcoming chapters to some extent, because it's kind of going to be on a lot of their minds at that period of time. And this is what we're reading here in this section. One other thing, if you just want to kind of look for confirmation from one other point, just to round out our parallels. So Yirmiyahu in 39, chapter 39 in Yirmiyahu. So Jeremiah. Right, so again, in chapter 39, verse 4, it happened when Tzidkiyahu, king of Yehuda, and all the men of war saw them, they fled and went forth from the city at night by way of the king's garden through the gate between the walls. The king went forth by way of Arabah. They pursued him, they caught him, right? They killed his children and his noblemen, and he blinded Tzidkiyahu and bound him and brought him to Babylonia. It's interesting also, we don't really hear much about Tzidkiyahu in exile, as opposed to, let's say, right, Yechonyah, which everything in our book here is like dated from Yechonyah's Galut, and he still seems to have a position of authority amongst the kings who are exiled from other places to Bavel. So, a very different experience. And Tzidkiyahu had been, right, and this is part of the problem, right? Tzidkiyahu was the pick of the Babylonians, their thought being, we'll install someone who we can trust, we can deal with, and that will create some stability. And in a matter of a couple of years, Tzidkiyahu turns that on his head and decides to rebel. And, right, it's kind of like egg on their face, because they removed Yechonyah only to replace someone else who ended up basically rebelling anyways. So, to some extent, and this is an interesting conversation that a lot of the modern Mefarshim have on this conversation, is, right, Bavel doesn't get called out in Sefer Yechezkel. So that could be for one of two reasons. I think the more obvious reason is because he's in Bavel, right? So you don't want to be touting anti-Babylonian stuff in the streets if you don't want to get in trouble. So he's limited in terms of his ability to speak about it, which is probably why Tzidkiyahu as well is not mentioned by name, because, that rebel king who basically caused the army to have to go over there to oppose him and everything else was probably not the most popular person. Even if you're talking negatively about him, even if it's kind of about, right, the Jews in Jerusalem getting destroyed, you just don't want to bring up Tzidkiyahu in the streets of Babylonia. You're going to get yourself in trouble. So that's I think the more obvious reason for, right, both those issues, why it's all an illusion. It's pretty clear once I think you put all the pieces together, right, it fits pretty well. But on the other hand, you, right, a little bit curious why in the explanation he doesn't explain who he's talking about and doesn't really call out Bavel either. So the other explanation that's given about why not calling out Bavel is because in this context, Bavel is God's bludgeon. Right now, Bavel is being used to basically teach the Jews a lesson, an important lesson about idolatry and other corruptions that have, right, befallen the Jewish people, and to kind of shake them into reformation. It's possible that in that context, while they are God's bludgeon, we're not going to also talk about their demise and their downfall, because right now we're focused on, right, them being the bludgeoning object, bludgeoning tool. But it's only a theory, but it's possible.
Right.
And it could be they're both true. They're not mutually exclusive either.
I mean, is it that much different than with Mitzrayim?
No.
It's just kind of the same, right?
Yeah. Right.
I mean,
so only until the end.
Right.
So meaning we don't hear about, right, the Jews go to Egypt, and then we pick up the story, right, when, right, all of a sudden they've now overstepped their bounds by working the Jews way too hard, right, and they've created such an imbalance that God steps in right at that moment. But for all those years that they're slaves, and the Egyptians are in fact are the bludgeon of God, we don't hear anything. The story just kind of is empty. So it is very similar, right, to the Egyptians during the course where the Egyptians are teaching the Jews, right, to be a nation or whatnot, or to fight for certain ideals. It's only kind of when that purpose is no longer being kept and it gets to a point that's unbearable, that's when the conversation switches, it shifts, and all of a sudden Babel is no longer the tool of God, but is now the enemy. Anyways, all thoughts. So now, moving forward in the chapter, we now kind of get back to the first part of what we talked about from, right, the siege and the famine. So, in addition to putting the blame squarely on the shoulders of Zidkiyahu and his leadership, so now the text shifts to Vayidvar Hashem Elai Lemor, Pasuk Yud Zayin, Pasuk 17, and the word of God came to me saying, Ben Adam lachmecha bara'ash tochel, son of man, bread with loud noises, with trembling, right, you will eat. Mimecha beregza uvid'aga tishta, and water with fear and worry you will drink. V'amarta el am haaretz, and there at the am haaretz, who we noted many times in Sefer Melachim, or the leadership of, right, who often were around in the vacuums of power, helping to transition leadership from king to king. Right, so say that Ko Amar Hashem Elokim liyoshvei Yerushalayim el admat Yisrael lachmam b'da'aga yochelu u'mimehem b'shimamon yishtu l'ma'an teisham artzam mimolo mechamas kol yoshvim ba. Right, so basically tell the leadership this very thing, right, that in fact it's because of your Hamas and some of the other things, everyone's going to be cleared out of the city, and any eating and drinking you do is going to be done with great fear. Ve'arim no shavot techaravna va'aretz shemamat hiya v'yedatem ki ani Hashem, right, and everything's going to be destroyed. The inhabitants of the city will be ruined, the land will be desolate, and you will know that I am Hashem, your God. Vayhi dvar Hashem elai lemor. Furthermore, Ben Adam, ma mashal hazeh. So explain yourself, right? This is actually very interesting, this chapter, with having the symbolic act, and then God almost speaking to Yechezkel saying, well, what did you see? It's very reminiscent of Zechariah, when Zechariah sees these menorahs and these other things, and he's basically got this angel on his side, on his shoulder. He's like, what was that? Right? And this gets into prophecy sometimes, right? Sometimes we think that the prophets, right, saw with this, right, very clear guise exactly what God was telling them, and there are times, like Yonah, right, who thinks Od Arbaim Yom Ninveh Napaches, that in 40 days Ninveh is going to be destroyed, and what it really means is it's going to turn over their actions and they're going to do tshuva, and he didn't realize even what he was saying when he was saying it. And so, right, you have times where the prophet only half gets what is he saying, and sometimes he needs help from God, an angel, etc., to actually understand what it is that he saw, sees, is asked to do or convey. So, right, what is this mashal that you saw? Right, so what's the mashal? What's the saying that you hear, right? That people say, They say prophecy is dead, and right the days will last out. In other words, right, that the Jews in Yerushalayim, what are they saying? Yeah, those prophets, they've been telling us the Beit HaMikdash is going to be destroyed forever, and it's never happened. So they're just going to keep on saying it, and it's just going to keep on not happening. And right, eventually, maybe in some distant future, it's going to happen, but don't you worry. It's basically going to be like the prophecy is going to be lost, because it's going to be so long before it actually comes true. I will destroy this parable. Right? I'm gonna right, disabuse them of all of their misconceptions about exactly how and when these prophecies are going to take place. That is not a phrase you're going to hear anymore, right, from the Jews in Yerushalayim, because the days of reckoning are upon them. They are coming imminently. There's not going to be any more of these, right, fake news, right, any more fake prophecies, so to speak, about what is about to take place. Ki ani Hashem adaber, et asher adaber, davar ye'aseh, lo simashech od ki bimechem, beit hameri adaber, davar v'asisi v'ne'um Hashem Elokim. It's happening now. Vayidavar Hashem eila le'mor, ben adam, hinei beit Yisrael omrim hechazon asher hu chozel li'amim rabim, ulitim rechokot hu nibei. They're stubborn, right? The people of Israel are still saying that the prophecies that you see are for a far off time. Say to them, it's not going to last any longer. So you can see, right, it's kind of interesting, right, in this chapter alone, Yechezkel is repeating a lot of the same themes that we've seen in the book, but he seems to almost be frustrated with the fact that he has to keep on repeating them, or God's frustrated and he's just reflecting that, right? But it's almost like he has to say the same thing 10 times for it to even make a dent, right? He literally just got off saying the mashal, I'm going to get rid of that mashal, and then literally a second later, they're still saying, right, that this chazon is for the future. And he has to again say to them, no, it's for now. It's for now. It's happening now. Get it in your head. It's now.
I mean, I know in the like when you read Jeremiah, for example, you get the sense that he's running around and there's a ton of false prophets running around. They're all saying everything's fine, don't you worry. And he's, I don't know if he's the lone prophet of doom, but he's certainly a prominent one.
Yeah, he suffers with that greatly.
Right. So is there a sense that in Babel there's sort of the same thing with a group of false prophets?
So we don't get that sense at all.
Because you wonder a little bit, and maybe it's just because they're now exiled not that long ago. And,
right.
But you sort of, if you reflect on current times, it's really hard to figure out what's real news.
Oh my gosh, it's
just
impossible.
So much noise.
It's impossible.
And interpretations and stuff, and you sort of wonder if people suffer from that, where
right.
Everybody has so many news sources, prophet sources saying, don't worry, it's all good.
Right.
Nothing will ever happen to the temple. And,
right.
And that's where he's like this one voice sort of speaking out. And so, in Babel, if there are no other false prophets, maybe he does stand a little bit of a chance to turn the tide of
right.
information.
Right. It seems like, right, part of the conversation that we've had about prophecy and exile and everything else is that it's much more limited in terms of there being prophets, big prophets, in exile, and prophesying in exile. Right, Yechezkel is one of the few, and we had the whole conversation as to maybe he started his career as a prophet in Israel. So all of that leads to there being a very greatly diminished possibility for there to be multiple voices, right? As opposed to Yirmiyahu, who's working in Yerushalayim, who's working in Israel, right? So he has to deal with, right, all these other people who are claimed to be false prophets, and when. Right, and I think of the Beit HaMikdash being destroyed or not, like it's like the bulls versus the bears sometimes in the stock market. Like literally, like every single day, there's like some people are like, oh, the stock market's it's going down tomorrow, and it's just always tomorrow, and the bulls are always like, oh, we're going up tomorrow. Like it's just always, they always have these two like views about the whole situation. It's right. It's just right, and it's amazing to me, right? Because they're just all right, just screaming out.
Well,
And
eventually
they're both right, and then they point to that, and they're like, see.
Eventually, I'm wondering it's the more we get into this, the more you're explaining it. It seems very much like this is very much like leaving Mitzrayim. That we talk about the Arba Lashon Geula, the Parshas Va'era, the 4 ways we talk about the redemption. That they were stages.
Mm-hmm. It's a process.
So these are all. It's not. I mean, we think humans. I don't know, or maybe Jews. We think about things like the crossing of the Red Sea. Bang! It happened, and then everybody was drowned. It just happened all at once. So as like a history person, what we like to do in history is we like to find watersheds. We like to, those are the things that we can latch onto. This is when it all changed. This is when World War I started. And the truth is that it's much more a bunch of things slowly moving in a way that eventually leads to, right? And the same as the process of these people being exiled. It takes them a long time to shift their perspective from being the rejected to being the future. It takes them a long time to accept the fact that Beit HaMikdash is ever going to be destroyed. It takes them a long time to wrap their head around a lot of the things that Yechezkel is trying to almost reteach them. And I think you're right. I think it's a great point. I think that the people who left Egypt also had a lot of trouble transitioning from being slaves to being free. And what prompted me on this was when we were talking about Yechanya, I'm thinking, when we read about when Mordechai, coming up on Purim, we read the Megillah, and we talk about the exile of Yechanya,
Mm-hmm.
and we read it in the tune of Eicha, which is the destruction of the temple, which it wasn't the destruction of the temple physically.
Right, it wasn't.
But
it was the beginning. But
it's right. In other words, it's the begin. In other words, to me, just now, thinking about this, it kind of prompts me now when I think about what's going to happen when we read the Megillah on Purim. What we're talking about is that it actually was the beginning of the destruction of the temple, even though
it's the silver lining.
Even though it's not the destruction of the temple,
and it ends up being the saving. It's the saving.
Well, right, but that is when it started. So so we really should read that kind of in the tune of Eicham, maybe, and think about that as the beginning of the destruction of the temple, even though it doesn't happen for
100%
decades later.
You would love talking to my father-in-law. My father-in-law loves talking about Egypt as a process. Like he teaches in Stern. Like I think he has like a whole maybe 2-part class where this is what he kind of highlights, and he goes through a whole bunch of Parshanim who actually argue the same thing.
But didn't we say Mordechai went down with the first exile?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So it all.
Right.
With this exile, with Yechezkel, this is the group
The
that
first exile,
which ends up being the silver lining, which ends up being the group that's saved in the future. But it's still, and it's I mean the 10 tribes already were exiled, but it's the first exile of Yehuda.
But still, right. So if we were going strictly according to history, we wouldn't be singing the tune of Eicha.
Right.
But if we're saying that this was the foreshadowing of
right,
what
what's
was
to come.
coming, it's the beginning.
Right.
And your interpretation is completely dependent on where you put your start mark and
right.
your end mark.
Also,
Right.
Yeah, like the Arab-Israeli conflict. It's like, well, it depends when you start the history.
Absolutely.
Anyways, we'll stop here. We'll pick up next week.
Thank you very much. Thank you.